Hello, thank you for attending our CASA training on foster care coordination. This was a training that was put together in part with Division of Family Services, so I want to thank them very much. But I wanted to kind of go into what exactly goes into becoming a foster parent and how can CASAs best work with foster parents, since so often we find ourselves working with foster parents and establishing visits and kind of what are the expectations. So I'm going to share my screen here and let's kind of dive in a little bit. First of all, we want to go through what are the expectations, how does somebody become a foster parent? So with the first thing that somebody does once they decide that they would like to become a foster parent is they express an interest to the Division of Family Services. That means they reach out, they call one of the local offices, as there are several throughout the state, and express an interest. They will then be directed to the foster care division, the program within Division of Family Services, and asked to attend a 3-hour orientation. This 3-hour orientation is provided either by a Division of Family Services staff member or an agency staff person. And I will explain the difference between a Division of Family Services foster home versus a private agency foster home in just a few minutes. So they attend this 3-hour orientation, understand the rules, regulations, expectations, and requirements to become a foster parent. Once they attend this orientation, they are then invited to sign up for the next foster parent training. So once that invitation is extended, they will then undergo a 27-hour-long training on how to be a foster parent. That training is typically offered 6 times a year, and it is currently being provided by Prevent Child Abuse Delaware. So that is a contract agency. Prevent Child Abuse Delaware holds the contract for providing foster care training. So once a foster parent or parents go through this total of 30 hours of training, we've got our 3-hour orientation as well as our 27 hours in the seat training, then they are able to become an official certified foster parent. But who can become a foster parent? So we are looking for anybody who is single, married, or in a committed relationship. You need to be an adult, so at least 21 years old. There is no maximum age. There used to be the maximum age of 65, but that is no longer the case. But our minimum age is 21 years old. The interested person must be either a homeowner or have received permission from their landlord, meaning their landlord has allowed them to have additional people live in the home, and then the home must pass a DFS home assessment. So there are specific rules about how much square foot per child. A child must have their own bed. They do not need their own bedroom, but they need to have their own bed as well as storage space and kind of space to belong. So we want to make sure that the home actually has enough space for a child to live in. But it can be either a homeowner or somebody who is renting but has received permission from their landlord in order to allow this to happen. DFS will assess the home. The person will also have to undergo a background check and fingerprinting. So there are some criminal charges that prohibit the people from becoming foster parents, mainly felonies and a few other charges, but an extensive background check will be conducted on potential foster parents. And then the interested foster parent must provide positive references. So this is pretty similar to actually what CASAs go through to become child advocates, minus the home inspection, of course, but when it comes to background checks, fingerprinting, and providing positive references, it's pretty similar. So these are the steps that if somebody takes if they are interested in becoming a foster parent. So we have a whole separate training. We have previously received a separate training on how foster parents receive payment. So I want to be very clear that foster parents do not make money off of children. They do not get paid ahead of time. It is a reimbursement. So for the month of July, let's say they get paid on August 1st. So the money goes out first and then they are reimbursed. So there are levels of care, and we will have a podcast on what exactly is a level of care. But children who come into state custody have a 1 through 5 level of care. The level of care dictates what needs this child might have. So for example, a 1 might be a healthy infant with no medical issues. A teenager by nature is a level 3. Teenagers use more electricity, they eat more food, their clothing is more expensive, they require more hygiene products. But a level 5 might be a child who is physically or emotionally or mentally disabled. They might have additional services that need to be put in place. The home might need to be equipped for a person who is unable to walk themselves, maybe a wheelchair or some other adjustment made to the home. So foster parents who are eligible to care for different levels of care for children will be reimbursed on a different scale. So for example, level 1 children will receive $20 a day. Level 2 children will receive $30 a day. Level 3 children will receive $35 a day. Level 4 children will receive $45 a day. Level 5 will receive $55 a day. So those reimbursements do come at the end of the month. And depending on how many days in the month dictates how, what the reimbursement total amount will be. There are respite services available for foster parents. So if you've ever heard the term respite, just means a break. So sometimes foster parents go out of town, they might go out of the country, they might be attending a family reunion or some reason why the youth experiencing foster care is not permitted to attend. They might also, maybe the foster family is responding to a medical issue with another family member. Perhaps it's kind of an emergency situation. So the youth experiencing foster care will go into a respite home. Those respite services are generally for a very short time, a couple days to, a week or two. So there are some respite services as well, but foster parents can choose what type of child enters their home, meaning, that sort of like CASAs agree to take a case, a foster parent agrees to accept a child. So there are some foster parents who have received additional training in specific areas. So for example, a foster parent might take some additional training on responding to substance exposed infants. They know how to treat and respond to a child who has been exposed to substances prenatally. We might have another foster parent who really specializes in teenagers and would like to continue to have teenagers in their homes. Others will agree to take sibling groups. So foster parents can work with their foster care coordinator to determine what kind of placement works best. We want placements to work out. We want it to be a positive experience for everyone. So a lot of kind of matchmaking goes in ahead of time to try to ensure that limited amount of foster placement disruptions will occur. So there are two different terms. We've got foster care versus kinship care. So kinship care is a specific care for a specific child. Most of the time, the kinship care provider has a relationship to a certain child. They may not be biologically related, but they do have some type of relationship between themselves and this specific child. So many people become foster parents and don't have a specific relationship with any child experiencing foster care, where a kinship care provider basically becomes a foster parent specifically for that child. So for example, it could be a relative, it could be an aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa. Maybe they are unable to file for guardianship or permanent guardianship. Maybe we are still working on reunification, so they don't want to take that action quite yet. But rather than putting a youth in a foster home where they may not know those foster parents, perhaps that family member becomes a qualified kinship care provider. Other times we've had kids find their own kinship care providers, meaning it is an ex-step parent, for example. They are not biologically related, but they are emotionally connected. That kinship provider will receive some financial assistance. So for children who are 12 years and under, they get $10 a day. And for children who are 13 years and older, get $15 a day. Again, teenagers naturally cost a little bit more money. So that's why there's a little bit more of an increase for that age group. We can see, between $10 and $15 a day versus $20 to $55 a day as a foster parent. Kinship care providers do not receive as much financial assistance, but it is something, and this is a program that has kind of gone up and running and continues to work through Children's Choice, as they have a kinship care navigator program. And we understand that the purpose of kinship care is to keep children with their family or with people that they have a relationship with. So foster parent training is a total of those 30 hours. We've got that 3-hour orientation. Many times during that orientation, interested foster parents are able to ask any question they might have, raise any concern they might have, and speak openly about their thoughts about becoming a foster parent. If they agree and determine that this is an experience that they would like to partake in, and if the orientation providers determine that it is a good fit, then they will move on to that 27-hour training. It's usually one night per week for 9 consecutive weeks. They were virtual for a while. I'm not sure if they're back in person or not, but it is offered by Prevent Child Abuse Delaware. And they do follow the Institute of Human Services pre-service training curriculum. So it's a nationwide training curriculum that they follow over that 9-week period of time. Once somebody becomes a foster parent, they are required to get between 5 to 20 hours per calendar year of continuing education. So it might be a certification in responding to a substance exposed infant. It might be working with teens. It might be working with biological family members. So they receive some continuing education training throughout their experience as a foster parent. They are required to be CPR and first aid training. It's required every 2 years, and they're able to get that certification. Foster homes become certified to house certain levels of care children. So as we reviewed earlier, level 1 through level 5 determines the child's needs. So certain foster homes might become certified to house and provide care for level 5 children, or that higher level of care. So there are some increased trainings that allow foster parents to be certified to provide care to those higher level children. Then twice yearly, there's a newsletter that informs foster parents of upcoming trainings. They usually once a year have a foster parent recognition luncheon. That doesn't count as training necessarily, but it's to get together and visit with other foster parents, get to know one another, and kind of continue to create that community of child welfare. So here's a look at the foster care pre-service training curriculum. These are the modules, and it is followed by the Institute of Human Services curriculum. So the very first model, we've got our orientation, getting to know fostering, kind of rules and regulations and expectations. Module 2 looks at the child protection team, who all is involved in protecting this particular child. In Delaware, we've got the Division of Family Services. We might have some mental health professionals. We have the foster parents, and then there might be some others as well. Module 3 looks at child development, looking at Erickson's stages of human development, understanding how babies develop up through their teenage years. When should generally children be partaking in certain physical, emotional, and social activities? And then what to do if a foster parent recognizes that there might be some concerns. Module 4 looks at trauma and its effects. We know that the nature of being in the child welfare system is trauma. That some trauma has occurred. If anything, it's the removal from the biological family. There might be some additional trauma as well that has happened prior to coming into state custody. And then Module 4 examines the effects that trauma has on the developing brain. Module 5 looks at child sex abuse. Module 6 looks at minimizing the trauma of placement. We know through many, many studies that the more times a child changes placements, the more trauma occurs and more regression occurs. So we want to look at minimizing the trauma of placement if they are placed in one foster home, and then minimizing continuing placements as well. That kind of goes into module 7, transcending differences in placements. Not all foster homes are created equal. And we just want to have foster parents understand how children can benefit from the experience in foster care and how to make that a positive experience rather than a negative one. Module 8 looks at helping the child manage emotions and behaviors. We think about this a lot, especially as children visit with their biological parents or biological family members. There might be some mixed messages. There might be some trauma that goes to leaving those parents again. So kind of helping the child manage those emotions and then particular behaviors. Module 9 is just understanding primary families. How do families function, and what role does a foster parent have in this reunification process? Module 10 finally looks at the effects of caregiving on the caregiver's family. So we never ever want to underestimate the essence and the necessity of self-care. So this allows module 10 to understand the effects of caregiving and then possibly create some ways to support the caregiver's family. So expectations of foster parents. Division of Family Services expects that foster parents will show up at the table, be participatory, especially in court hearings and in team meetings. So we want to make sure that the foster parent is part of the process. In the last maybe 5-ish years, family court judges have done a great job inviting foster parents to attend court hearings, encouraging them to come. Remember that foster parents are not a party to a case, so they do not get any of the legal documents or other documents submitted in court. They don't receive any of those documents. So it's very helpful for a foster parent to attend court hearings because they are able to hear all the evidence that's being put on in front of the court about reunification and how the parents are progressing on their case plan. So there's a huge benefit to foster parents participating in court. Plus, oftentimes, if the judge doesn't ask, one of the other attorneys asks the foster parent to testify about how the child is doing in their home. That testimony is crucial because that foster parent is the one providing the day in and day out care for this particular child. We also expect foster parents to attend an icebreaker meeting with the biological family. We'll chat about those in just a moment. And then we want the child to feel like they are living rather than visiting the foster home. So as a CASA, one of the things you can do when you go into the foster home, because remember, we want our CASA volunteers to visit youth experiencing foster care at least once a month, preferably in their placement. We want you to go in that foster home, take a look at the bedroom. Does the child have appropriate room to sleep? Are there covers on the bed? Is there a specific place for storage for that child? Preferably that is an actual piece of furniture, not a plastic trash bag. So we want to make sure that that child lives in that home rather than is visiting. We can go into the bathroom. Does the child have their toothbrush there? Do they have a designated hygiene spot? Is there a place at the table, the dining table, where they sit and they eat and enjoy a family meal together? So we want to make sure that that child is living at the home, not just visiting. And it's really up to the foster parent to ensure that that child has that sense of belonging. If we go back to pre-service CASA training, thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the top of that triangle, is the sense of belonging and self-confidence. So the foster parent can play a key role in providing that confidence and self-esteem. So we have this relationship between the foster parent and the foster care coordinator. This is somebody who is different than the Division of Family Services social worker. So remember, when you're working a case, you will work with, at first, an investigation DFS worker. Then that will move on to the treatment Division of Family Services social worker. That treatment worker is the one who provides the services to reunify. Then we have our permanency DFS social worker who's working on permanency for the child if the permanency plan is no longer reunification. So that permanency worker will work on guardianship, permanent guardianship, adoption, or APLA. But now that we have a foster parent, we also have a foster care coordinator. This is somebody who works at the Division of Family Services, but is not the worker providing services. So kind of a different program within DFS. So that coordinator should visit the home within the first 5 days of the child being placed in that foster home. Then every 60 days, if the foster parent is a foster parent with less than a year of experience, and then every 90 days if the foster parent has over a year of experience fostering. Remember, this is just the foster care coordinator, not the Division of Family Services social worker. So your social worker will visit at least once a month, just like you as a CASA, but our foster parent coordinator has a little bit more time span between visits. They're certainly welcome to visit more often. And of course, we'll get involved if there is an issue, but we know that foster parent, will have contact with their foster care coordinator at least every 60 to 90 days. Our foster care coordinator will visit the child every quarter in their placement, no matter what. So again, if it's a foster parent less than a year, it will be every 60 days, but if it's over a year, every 90 days. So this is somebody else you can coordinate with to chat about how they think the child is doing in the home, in addition to that DFS social worker. So we talked in the very beginning about private agencies versus DFS agencies. Well, DFS. So we've got DFS foster homes. So if somebody becomes a foster parent through Division of Family Services, there are other families that would prefer to work with a private agency. The reimbursement scale is a little bit different and some of their policies are a little bit different. But in Delaware, we have a handful of foster care, private agency foster care providers. So here's our list. We have a better chance for our children. We have, and those also offer adoption services. We have Cayuga centers. Cayuga centers specialize in youth who experience emotional or behavioral challenges. We also have Child Inc. We have Children and Families First. We have Children's Choice. They are also an adoption agency as well. Then we have Presley Ridge and Progressive Life Center. So these are the 7 agencies that the Division of Family Services will contract with to oversee private agency foster homes. Really, the reason is no matter what day and age we're in, we never in Delaware rarely have enough foster homes to house all of the children experiencing foster care. So the more avenues we have to provide appropriate foster care coordination and homes, the better. So we've got these private agencies the state contracts with in order to increase possible placements. So DFS versus a private agency foster home. So everybody is contracted through the Division of Family Services, but now if it is a private agency, there will be a separate case manager or a social worker in addition to that DFS treatment worker. That worker who oversees that foster home might provide court testimony because they are also seeing the child and working with the foster family. They might be called to testify, not all the time, but it might be possible. And their primary role is to oversee that foster home. So what is the role between a foster parent and a biological parent? The very first thing is breaking the ice. So this is an activity that started a couple years ago that gets the biological parents together with the foster parents. So one of the expectations in becoming a foster parent is that they will participate actively in this icebreaker meeting. So the purpose is that it minimizes the trauma that the child experiences once they enter foster care. The foster family has open communication between the birth parents and the foster parents. One of the things that can do is provide a co-parenting team. We've got foster parents and biological parents, and it can be helpful for the child to realize that these two parenting figures are on the same page, they support the same thing, and they are co-parenting. It does, by having this icebreaker meeting, it does result in more stable placements and minimizes placement disruptions. It improves the reunification or permanency outcome, especially when that child sees that both parenting figures are working for the same thing. It helps birth parents preserve and strengthen their bonds with their child, especially because oftentimes foster parents are the ones providing transportation either to or from visits. So foster parents possibly will see the biological parents. If they have a stable, solid relationship that starts at this icebreaker meeting, that can generally be a good situation for all involved. And it encourages birth parents to engage in services more quickly. When they see and believe that their child is being well cared for, they can focus on themselves, address the issues that brought the child into foster care in the first place. And it does foster a smooth transition for children into new schools and new placements. They're just like any other intact family. Children are not experiencing two parenting figures fighting or at odds with each other. They see that everybody's on the same team and working for the same result. So a child can more easily transition to a new school and, if necessary, a new placement. So at this meeting, it is conducted by a facilitator. So somebody is directly in charge of facilitating this meeting. And it allows both foster parents and birth parents to talk about the needs of the child. This, because it happens early on in the placement, this is a great opportunity for foster parents to learn about the child coming into their home. It allows the birth parents to discuss their child, maybe their needs, and it allows the birth parents to take the first step in addressing the issues that brought the child into state custody in the first place. They can also, both parenting figures can share information about themselves as well as their parenting practices. Not all people parent the same. So it might be helpful to kind of share some parenting practices. Perhaps a foster parent has been a foster parent for a long time and they have some experience they can share, kind of the way they operate. And the meeting is really the first step in developing that relationship for these two very crucial members of a child's team. When they work together for the permanency plan, it is our hope that the child is able to continue with that permanency plan. So for us, if it is the biological parent participating, it's probably reunification, and that child is able to see that team as a working cohesive unit. So who, what, when, where of the icebreakers. So these meetings are really efficient if they're held early in the child's placement. So ideally within 5 to 10 days of that placement. They generally last 30 to 60 minutes or so. Generally who attends, we've got our birth parent or parents, foster parent or parents, the DFS worker, the foster home coordinator, and the child, if appropriate. So that's kind of dependent on the age and the developmental status of the child. Maybe they would like to participate as well. Again, we want to be a cohesive team. I know it might be difficult in the beginning of a placement, but this time frame is crucial, especially in determining the permanency outcome and pursuing that permanency outcome. So what is the role of DFS during this icebreaker? Is to schedule and facilitate it. Make sure that the participants understand why the meeting's being held and what will be discussed, ensuring that each person knows their own responsibilities. And keep the discussion focused on the child's needs. It's not a blaming, pointing fingers, accusatory type meeting. It's supposed to be a positive bonding meeting to allow both parenting figures to understand one another. And we want to ensure that the participants feel safe and comfortable. So the role of the DFS facilitator is to make sure that this all happens. At the icebreaker, the role of the birth parent is to share information about the child, including bedtime or daily routines, cultural traditions, favorite toys or foods, allergies, hobbies, and important relationships, as well as likes and dislikes of the child. It's helpful to allow the foster parents to get to know the child as soon as possible. And if parents have crucial information that can be helpful in that, we want to capitalize on that information. Might also understand special needs, medical, dental, behavioral, or educational needs that the child might have, as well as bringing important personal items for the child, such as a picture, a favorite toy, a snuggie, a huggy, if there's something particular that they sleep with, and then maybe a favorite toy or specific clothes that they really like. It allows for a smooth transition. So what is the role of the foster parent? So their role is to provide background information, such as how long they've been a foster parent, what are some of their practicing parenting practices. What are some of the rules of the house, such as bedtime routines and, chores? Maybe there's some chores around the house. Information on the family values and habits, disciplinary style, types of music, language, food, religion, or how are they involved in the community. The foster parent can also ask for specific information about the child from the parent, such as their own routines and medical needs, and ask questions that will help them best understand the child, including cultural traditions. So we want to know what is the child used to? We want to maintain that cultural identity as much as possible. And then the foster parent will be able to discuss how the child is adapting to the foster home. If the icebreaker meeting takes place within 5 to 10 days of placement, that child has been there for a few nights. Maybe the foster parent can share how the child is adapting to their home. So coming off of icebreakers, how does the foster parent and the CASA interact? So really the best thing is open communication and being respectful to one another. So CASA should be respectful of the foster parent's schedule. Foster parents are sometimes juggling schedules, their own work schedules, as well as their own biological children's schedules, as well as multiple foster youth schedules. So there's a lot of things that they're trying to balance. You may not want to make an appointment for 6 o'clock at night during a weekday. Maybe that foster parent is cooking dinner, maybe they're trying to get homework done, maybe they're trying to get baths done. So we want to be respectful of the foster parent's schedule. We can also ask the foster parent, what's the best way to communicate with that foster parent? It might be via text message, it might be by phone call, it might be by email, we never know. So we want to talk to that foster parent upon that first meeting to see how they prefer to be contacted. The CASA is permitted to visit monthly within the home. There should not be any reason why the foster family won't let the CASA in the home. If that is ever an issue for a CASA, they should contact their DFS worker and the foster care coordinator immediately, as well as your CASA coordinator, and have a team meeting about why this is happening. So the foster parent cannot prevent a CASA from coming into the home. So any disagreements should include that foster care coordinator and the CASA coordinator. Remember that the foster parent is not a party to the case, so confidentiality must be respected. If a foster parent asks a question about the case or how a parent is doing on their case plan, or any question that the CASA feels they would have to share information, it is perfectly acceptable to inform the foster parent that the CASA is not permitted to provide this information, but direct them to the foster care coordinator or the DFS social worker. It's not that they can't know that information, it's that the CASA is not the one to share the information. So CASA should ensure that foster parents know when the court hearing is and realize that they are encouraged to attend. We understand that a lot of foster parents work full-time and are unable to attend court hearings. We want to make sure that they're invited, they feel welcome, and that they are prepared to testify if they end up being called to testify. So it really comes back to that communication and respect of one another. And most our foster parents do receive training on what CASAs are and what the expectations are during their training, their foster parent training. But sometimes that information gets lost or forgotten. So we do want to make sure that foster parents are permitting CASAs to enter their home, visit their child at least once a month. And when you do enter the home, you can, like I said before, visit the bedroom, the bathroom, the dining area. And it's also acceptable to ask for you to have some one-on-one time with the child. The foster parent does not need to be present. So you could either have a room that has a little bit of secluded area, or especially if it's a nice day, take them outside, sit at the table, play basketball out in the driveway, play with sidewalk chalk, do something like that where you're outside and you can speak freely with the child without anybody overhearing your conversation. So I hope that helps understanding exactly what goes into people becoming foster parents, as well as your role as a CASA and how to interact best with a foster parent. I appreciate you listening, and I hope that this has been helpful, as well as preparing you to take on a case if you're taking on a new case or continue with your current one.